Welcome to another episode of Instant Payments Decoded. I'm your host, Marcia Klingensmith. I'm known as the Instant Payments Maven, and I'm just really thrilled today to bring you guys a topic that has really reshaped the payments landscape. So India's Unified Payments Interface, or also known as UPI. And UPI is often regarded as that gold standard for instant payments globally. And so in this webcast today, we're going to go beyond the surface to understand its development, the challenges that it was addressing, and what lessons that we can apply in the US and globally. And so my goal today is to help you guys uncover this transformative potential of this UPI success story and explore how these insights can inform your institution's modernization journey. And one of the interesting things that we want to just kind of probe on is the opportunity associated with the raising of the limits to $10 million. And to provide you insights on this journey, I have Srishti Srishti Jain. I've known you for a long time, and she's from RS Software, the company that's helped design and build UPI, bringing a firsthand perspective on its development and implementation. And I believe Vijay Anand will be joining us later. He's also, a seasoned payments consultant with global experience and including leadership roles at Mastercard and at Vocalink. And so he will also provide some insights as well. So anyway, so we're going to explore how UPI is addressing kind of like these critical social and economic needs in India. And what are those elements that are factors in its success, and what their journey will teach us about the future of payments and modernization as a whole. So before we so this is going to be an interactive dialogue. I'm going to have Srishti introduce herself, but as we go, if you guys have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. We can take you off camera, put your questions live, and so we like to have this interactive. So don't hesitate to share your questions. All right. So Srishti, could you share a little bit about about you and also about your company's role in building UPI and just, I guess, what it means to you personally?
Of course. Thank you, Marcia. Yes, you have known me for a very long time. The success of UPI is not just an Indian story. It's a blueprint for payments modernization globally. The global payments landscape is undergoing unprecedented transformations, as you're all probably aware of, as real-time payments scale worldwide, whether it's UPI in India, FedNow and RTP in the US, or SEPA Inst Credit in transfer in Europe. The need for scalable, interoperable, and secure infrastructures has never been greater. So I'm really excited today to address the issue with the increase in the limits in the US to 10 million for RTP transactions. And I think UPI offers great lessons in scaling real-time payments, fostering trust, and driving inclusion at a national level. For those of you that don't know me, so I work with RS Software. I'm an executive based in Europe, in Copenhagen, Denmark. We have a really bright sunny day, so I don't know how much the sunlight is coming into the screen here, but those are the must-love days in Denmark. So RS Software has been in business for over 3 decades, out of which 25 plus years, the main focus has been on a single domain, digital payments. So we really feel like we're an expert in the area of digital payments. We were almost 80% of the technology team for one of the largest schemes in the world, and the service spanned for more than 20 years. That's with Visa. And then with UPI, so the National Payment Corporation of India, they floated an RFP back in 2015 April, and there was participation from, you can probably name it, all of the major global companies that responded to the RFI and RFP. RS Software bid as well amongst the global leaders, and we were chosen as the strategic technology partner for NPCI for developing and scaling UPI, which is the digital payments platform that powers UPI today. We built the UPI platform from scratch. It was our architecture and design that won the RFP, and then we built it completely from scratch with appropriate involvement, of course, with NPCI and what guidelines they wanted as well, so that the input was there. The platform went live in record within 1 year of us winning the RFP. So that was a really exciting journey that I got to lead along with the team at RS Software from the business aspect. We continue to enhance UPI for NPCI, so our relationship is very strong with new features as it has to support the legendary scale with extreme availability. Just some numbers for those of you that are not aware. Today, there's more than 500 million transactions that are processed monthly at UPI, with a value exceeding more than $190 billion every month. More than 500, I'm keeping it all to dollars to obtain for the US audience. More than 540 million registered users on UPI, 450 plus banks. I think in February there were 653 banks as the record. So I personally feel like it's been really fulfilling to play a part in a platform that revolutionized financial inclusion for India's 1.4 billion people and setting global benchmarks in payment innovation. And Vijay is here to join us and share in this journey as well with amongst your global expertise. Nice to see you, Vijay.
Same here. Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, welcome. And so Vijay, you came just in time. We were just doing introductions, and so Srishti just introduced herself. So, I mean, your global experience is really valuable for this discussion. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey in payments, and then like what excites you about UPI's like broader implications?
I think I'm happy to be here sharing my thoughts. So I've seen the evolution of real-time payments in specific across the globe. I have been part of the implementation of UK faster payment, have seen UPI and IMPS getting implemented in India, have been part of NPP implementation for a large Australian bank, have seen the implementation in Singapore, have been part of US Fed Reserve Task Force for faster payment. I also have been part of some of the global implementation for some of the large banks for bringing the global real-time payment systems. So looking at the entire globe when real-time is becoming the reality, the focus is how do we make the payment what we call as super. So where it has to be very, very simple, ubiquitous. It has to be private. Privacy has to be very, very key. Ease of use and reliable. And UPI is a great example. And one of the most important part is how the UPI has been designed and conceived as an idea. So UPI is not about scaling just the technology. It is how digital explosion or the digital innovation touches every part of life. The idea is about adoption, the scalability. The key is not about the technology scalability. It is about the scalability of adoption. How do you create those reusable assets, which becomes the foundation? So the way UPI has been conceived is where it lies the what we have seen today, as Srishti was giving some very, very impressive statistics. We are talking about more than 15 billion transactions a month. That scalability cannot only come from the technology. It is all about how it has been adapted. We are talking about 340 million QR codes in India. And it is the simplicity of use, how it has been conceived and how it becomes, how it has touched the how digital power or the digital transformation has touched the life is the success story of UPI. So it has been very, very impressive. And there are some key tenets on how it has been architected. The focus is about creating minimal solutions and creating a public rail on which the private organization can come and drive the innovation. That becomes the foundation. And that is why it has been so impressive. It has, and there are, of course, a lot of events that has helped it grow where it has, with government push on demonetization coming in, with COVID, where people were not ready to touch the currency. These all have incentivized. So the focus of UPI has been to remove the friction in the payments. And how do you incentivize all the partners in the ecosystem? So there is something in it for everyone. And that is why it is simple. It is just like sending an email, sending a WhatsApp. And that is why the entire world is looking at UPI or the India Digital Innovation on how the digital public infrastructure DPI can be conceived. So very, very excited about sharing what we have seen. And I think we are fortunate to see it evolving and it getting used the way it is.
I love it. I mean, that was a really great background. And I think that's one of the things like with US, like UPI has been around for 10 years, but in the US, we've had real-time payments for 6 years now. And then FedNow is soon approaching its second year anniversary. And we're not seeing the adoption that we're seeing that you guys were seeing in India. And, part of it is that you guys had, this regulatory mandate. So I guess why don't let's talk a little bit about kind of like that catalyst. Like, what was that trigger that drove the launch? And I don't know, maybe Srishti, if we could go to you, like, what were those specific things that said, hey, we need to bring this thing to life, and what problems were we trying to solve?
Sure. So historically, as some of you might be aware of, India has been a cash major society. So while multiple payment rails existed, domestic cards, RuPay, biometric payments, AEPS, immediate mobile-based payments, IMPS, and more, the access to digital payments was extremely low. Prior to 2009, non-cash transactions stood at 6 per person per year. Out of 10 million retailers, only 0.6 million could accept a card. The only digital payment option and the bank accounts were used primarily for direct benefit transfers, DBT, but the payouts were almost all cash. So against this backdrop, NPCI, National Payments Corporation of India, was formed in 2009. And UPI was conceived to address this vision to proactively encourage electronic payment systems for ushering in a less cash society in India. That supported simplicity, innovation, adoption, security, affordability. Cost is a very big aspect for adoption in India, but I'm sure in many countries as well. So in 2016, when UPI launched, the vision was to increase financial inclusion. Before UPI, there was only 35% of adults that had access to digital financial transactions. Cash dependency, there was 96% cash-based in India prior to UPI. A lot of different disjointed systems. There were fragmented, closed-loop solutions that dominated the market that I just mentioned. So UPI it's a unified payment interface. It unified the ecosystem with interoperability across banks and non-banks, a mobile-first, real-time, low-cost payment mechanism, which was very important because India kind of leapfrogged from, it didn't go from like so much where everybody had laptops and computers to then to mobile phones. It kind of leapfrogged straight into mobile, driving adoption of the Jan Dhan bank accounts, Aadhaar, which is like the social security number, like a single mobile numbers. So this is now powers more than 480 million zero balance bank accounts that are linked to UPI. So this financial inclusion and getting access and low cost, these were really important for being able to really trigger the need for a unified payment interface. And a point that Vijay also mentioned was a platform for other players, fintechs, corporates, international players to be able to come and participate in the ecosystem.
How does one go about designing such a solution that's just, so massive, so diverse, so game changing? Srishti, how'd you guys go about doing that? That's crazy.
RS Software, the key reason why we were chosen amongst global competition for the RFP, we leveraged our decades of knowledge of building high volume, high performance, highly available, completely secure digital payment highways to design the system. And this is global experience. Our approach was to build scalable, API-driven, cloud-native architecture from day one so that the solution is future-proof. We designed it for 1.4 billion citizens, from urban fintech users to over 700 million rural consumers, which ensure global compatibility and future-proofing across border opportunities. So what some aspects that were interesting was that we deployed 11 specific design strategies to implement optimized flow, high execution speed, high security, horizontally and vertically linear scalability, reducing payload, system agility. These were all really essential to be able to serve the financial requirements of the next gen digital payments. And now we can happily say that UPI has consistently delivered with more than 99.9% uptime, processing up more than, as Vijay mentioned, billions of transactions monthly in the last month, daily during the peak periods as well.
Wow, that's crazy impressive. Go ahead. Yeah, Vijay, did you want to add some additional comments?
I think one of the very important thing which I have heard about how UPI, when it was getting conceived, is a very interesting quote. What it says is what works at a scale is different from scaling what works. So the focus was always on making it ready when it was getting designed. It was for reuse. The idea was context was made it agnostic. We were when each of the components was getting designed, the focus was not about how it will get used, because many of the users is left for the innovation from the different players. The idea was creating very minimalism was the focus when it was getting designed. There was a purpose, and it was creating a foundation. It was like the internet, which has been launched, or GPS that has been launched. And now what you make out of it was left for the innovators, and it was like a great area for the great brains to come and use that infrastructure that has been built. And that has been the key to success. The idea is when you are trying to create a technical solution as a given problem, that is different here. The focus was what we were trying, what the entire UPI or the India stack or the DPI, when it was getting conceived, it was about identifying the right set of foundation. And then it becomes the different innovation use cases can be developed over it. And that is why it has been so successful. Now, if you look at each of the, if you compare UPI with some of the other real-time payment systems in the world, the reason is the way it has been tried to really implement is creating that entire jam thing which Srishti was mentioning, where it was trying to identify the ways to handle the unbanked population. How do we bring the digital identity together, and how we take at the same time mobile price the data was very cheap in India. So the focus was how do we take the advantage of mobile users for making that payments accessible. And when you create those design principles together, then it becomes really a powerful game for changing or touching the lives of people. Why it is very different from any other adoption and why it has been so successful is about when it was trying to solve something which was going to touch each and every one. The focus was not on a given set of population. The idea was when you are trying to innovate, you were innovating at scale. The idea was, how do we give an identity to everyone? How do we give the disbursement? Government aid should reach out to people. Middlemen can be completely eliminated. How do we make sure that KYC can happen very quickly? And how do we create the kind of banking association with the people? Interestingly, there is a very interesting data. The banking penetration in India, because of Aadhaar and KYC, what it has achieved in 7 years, it has, as part of the global standard, it would have taken 46 years. And that has been the strength of the way the entire DPI has been designed. Where it was,
where, go ahead.
Yeah, you had a question, Marcia?
No, no, no. I was just thinking how, that's like there's other regions of the world that can definitely benefit from kind of this design and this growth opportunity. Like when how you've talked about accelerating the deployment and I mean, I didn't mean to cut you off. I mean, there's been a lot of great things between the two of you. You're talking about kind of like this future-proof system where we're putting everything with APIs and in the cloud and trying to provide this simple experience that is just easy for even the most rural players to adopt and then there's different. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you guys have both been sharing here. So just trying to pull out some of the things that I took notes on here. But with the identity and the the mobile factors and the QR codes and the simplicity and the cloud-based nature and the APIs and the standardization. So those are some of the elements.
Yeah, absolutely, and interoperability has been the key, where how easily it can integrate. How do we make sure that we create a larger ecosystem? We have more than 650 banking institutions which are part of UPI, which is a massive number, and that clearly shows the way it has been accepted. And even the payment of 10 cents and 5 cents is happening through QR code. That is unthinkable at any part of the world. And the focus was how do you incentivize everyone? Every player should see what is in it for them. How do you give that assurance that money, many a times it is an emotional thing where people and coming from a society which has been completely on cash. How do you make sure that and if you look at the way you are touching, you are not touching only the tech savvy, affluent people. You were the focus was reaching out to the mass. And that is why it has been adopted so well. When you design it for a scale, I think that somehow that statement has really been with me whenever I have to come, whenever I look at the UPI. And it has been when you are looking at adoption, when you are looking at scalability, then that has to be innovation at a scale is the key. And that is why you have to plan for something which is touching everyone. You cannot decide to go. I mean, it is kind of a different thesis, right? Where there is a philosophy that you go small, try to do a pilot and then go big. It is a different way it has been approached and it has been quite successful.
That's an interesting perspective. Hey, we're going to do a little bit of audience interaction, guys. So I'm going to launch a poll here. So it may pop on your main screen or it might pop on the side. But the question is, what do you guys think is the most significant challenge to launching a new payment system? Is it, trying to get that customer adoption? Is it complying with regulations? Is it, these legacy system constraints? Is it that interoperability and integrating with other payment systems? So look for that poll. We'd love to get your perspective. And we're gonna keep continuing the conversation, but take a look and share your thoughts there. So you, Vijay, you just spent a lot of time about really talking about kind of this value prop and the success and how it was a very simple design and very scalable, and the different approach instead of doing an MVP, kind of going at scale. So can you talk a little bit maybe about what are these the key pillars that made this possible?
I just want to make one clarification. There most definitely was an MVP that was submitted that did win the RFP. And I don't believe that the solution could have been so simple to use if the technology backing it didn't have those abilities to be able to do it. So I just want to make that clarification. There most definitely was an MVP here. It became so simple to use because of the pillars that support it and what has gone into using it. And the reason why it's been able to be adopted as the vision was most definitely there, but the reason why it could get adopted with such a large scale community was because the technology supported it and offered the interoperability. It offered the real-time settlement, which was huge. It was the first one to accomplish that globally, real-time settlement in under 2 seconds, 24/7 availability. Cost-free transactions, of course, is what the government supported with being able to promote adoptions. Open APIs as well, which really enabled Google Pay, Phone Pay leaders globally to be able to participate in the ecosystem, again, driving the adoption and driving the growth and scalability of it. So yes, go ahead.
Thanks for
absolutely, Srishti. See, MVP. The need of MVP was definitely, it has been the key to the success, how it has been conceived, designed, and that has been successful because it has been architected properly. And the point which I was making was not about that there wasn't a need of MVP. The idea was when it was being thought about, it was thought about at a scale where it was never thought that a particular part of the society will be where it will get launched.
Exactly.
It was
the inclusion.
It was always meant to be architected at a very high scale, high transaction, low cost kind of solution. That was always the key because and India is a very complex society. It is not a place where you could have you can do things in segments. It won't have been possible. So I think when you are driving the solution, MVP is the key. You have to make sure that you have defined all the tenets and the reusable assets, which I was talking about, very, very carefully, so that it can really weave together and it becomes the right kind of foundation. And I think one of the key tenets, if you look at it, is the user-centric design, where the entire interface which was getting conceived, it is very, very intuitive, right? It eliminates the need of the various things which you think about. You are trying to not, again, as I mentioned, talk about this solution. It was about people who were not very computer literate, who were not mobile literate. The idea was how you make it so simple that you can use a phone number, you can use a bank account number, you can create a VPN. So it has something for everyone. So whatever way you want it to use. Otherwise, in India, before UPI, there was no way you could have done account to account. You have to go to bank and use the net banking, NEFT, or otherwise it was the middleman. And that was to really launch it and make a solution which gets accepted by everyone. It has everyone, every society, every member of the society, as well as the larger ecosystem where private players played an important role, have very, very interesting way it has been adopted. Because if you can just imagine the way it is accepted in the QR code in a roadside shop, which is selling very, very small grocery shop. It is unthinkable in any part of the world.
Most definitely.
And yeah. Well, so is there and so the key pillars? So I think there's some unique components about the structure of UPI. You talked a little bit about before, like the Aadhaar and the.
No, I think the way it was getting designed, what it is called is JAM, where J stands for Jan Dhan Yojana, where unbanked were given an account with a zero cash kind of account. A became the Aadhaar, which is the authentication. M stands for mobile, where mobile was used as a way for authenticating people. So I think all of these came together, and there were different layers which was put together when it was getting conceived. There were 4 different layers where the focus was how do you create a presence-less layer, which was using Aadhaar card and mobile Aadhaar. Paperless layer, which was using KYC, and a digital locker was given where you can really have the document. Cashless layer constituted of UPI, and then the most important one, consent layer, where you can have a protocol for sharing of data and information as well as the payments. And that is how it has aggregated together, where every player had a role to play. It was taken almost whether the fintechs, banks, corporates, retailers, everybody was taken into confidence, and there was a definite role for them in the entire stack which was getting developed, and that is how that India stack has come together. And the key has been how mobile was used for getting an identity. The way Aadhaar has been launched in such a short time, where India never had a digital identity. And it has been launched at a very, very massive scale. And that helped making sure that you are authentic, you are able to authenticate and you have the right recipient for making the payments. So that entire infra came together for making sure that the payment which you are making is secure. Because see, the most important part is you needed to have the trust in the system. When you are launching something so massive, the sentiments of people who have never seen anything like this to really use this. India, as you know, is not is not heavily penetrated by credit cards because the trust system was not there. And to really make people pay, which is irreversible payment, by the way, the trust factor was very, very important. And that is why all the people came together, and the way it has been designed, the way it has been executed, and the way reliability, which Srishti was mentioning, high availability. Now, you will not see a lot of examples where some payments have been missed because of system not being available. So that all has helped people have absolute trust in the system. And Aadhaar ensured that authentication is proper, so you can have the secure payments. Speed is important, mandatory, but at the same time, privacy and making sure that the payment is secure is very, very important, even for the people who are making very, very small denomination of payments. And what is important is it has completely democratized. It doesn't matter what is the volume of the money which you are transferring.
Okay, so that, I mean, I think that's all. I love the view. So we talked about presentless, paperless, cashless, and then the consent angle. I guess, Srishti, would you like to elaborate, like maybe, talk a little bit about maybe, I don't know, how the digital identity done, or what were some of these technology elements, and maybe even monetization opportunities, what else? I mean, I guess, how can you elaborate a little bit more on kind of some of these pillars of success?
Of course, yeah. So, foundational decisions that were made from technology perspective to serve scalability was to make the solution hyper distributed while maintaining affinity for a single transaction to be preferably on the same path across the system. So interoperability, as we've talked about many times now, more than 653 plus banks in the last month, and to work seamlessly across one UPI ID, which works across all the platforms. Real-time settlement under 2 seconds, open APIs, it sparked innovation from fintech giants, and then ISO 20022, which enables standards for richer data and cross-border capability. Cloud and microservices-based architecture from inception for horizontal scaling, which was critical for handling daily transaction volumes exceeding more than 500 million. The decision to enable innovation was at the core of fostering inclusivity. This was realized by supporting externalization of authentication at the payment initiation leg. So there was layered authentication, including Aadhaar and biometrics, to ensure security and access even in a low bandwidth area, which is very important in a country like India. Supporting virtual payment address, VPAs, and QR code-based acceptance, all of which enabled the larger players like Google Pay and others to innovate and drive inclusion. So UPI supporting UPI Lite, so offline payments for small transactions, which didn't require verification, the two-factor authentication at that moment, was huge in being able to do some of the smaller transactions in areas where connectivity was low. And those transactions have been more than 150 million transactions monthly. So it's not a small amount that are taking place on the offline real-time transactions as well.
Can we talk a little bit about, so I know we talked a lot about small dollar, the 5 cent, these like little rural payments. But one of the things that's interesting is this. This is definitely a tool. We hear P2P. That's what everybody thinks about when we think about instant payments. But like, is instant payments being used for large dollar transactions as well? Like now we have this new, open limit on real-time payments with the real-time with our real-time payment network. And would love to hear how India is taking advantage of these instant payment rails also for transacting for business. Like what are some of those use cases that you guys are seeing maybe from a B2B perspective and maybe a larger dollar?
Sure. So P2P transfers was the original view when UPI was kind of conceived at the launch. But today, P2P transfers is only making up 40% of the transactions. P2M, persons to merchant, is making up more than 60%. So commerce has been a key use case for being able to gain traction at scale, as monthly transactions are now well above 500 million. So commerce as a use case has been huge, and the daily limits has been increased. So I have some numbers from the Indian rupees aspect, but those numbers increasing has been key in being able to drive commerce from a P2M perspective. Making it ubiquitous across urban and rural India. Government direct benefit transfers, DBT, over $85 billion annually dispersed via UPI. Recurring payments and e-mandates, subscriptions, utilities, insurance premiums, all processed in real time, which would be hard to find in most other countries. So these, the limits that we have today for the P2P limit, for the P2M limit, the daily limit was only 1/10 of the amount that it is today. So those limits have really been increased and really enabled the commerce. So I would say that's been the main use cases.
Okay, so there's not really as much for these larger B2B transactions. It's more like the interaction between the consumers and businesses and governments and all that sort of stuff. So it's more of a consumer solution then.
Well, I think that as the real-time payments limits increase, I think B2B payments, cross-border remittances, supply chain finance are going to gain more and more traction, because the focus initially was the consumer aspect, so enabling P2P and P2M. That's why there's been more of that, but the B2B payments is most definitely increasing as we talk.
Got it. And what about
there's some very interesting use cases that has been developed over it. One of the other interesting one is what we call as a toll plaza NETC, which is FASTag, which gives an identity to each vehicle. So at every toll, when you have to make the payments, it is using you have the RFID, which reads, and you can make the payment through the vehicle, which has been a transformation here, because the way probably we have the infrastructure getting developed in India, the kind of queues which we used to see in India for making those payments, for all those places, that has been another example of how vertical innovation is coming up, where you are trying to use that UPI in a way it wasn't conceived. Credit on UPI is another interesting innovation that is coming in, and now India is all set for creating that unified lending in interface, where we are trying to make sure that the lending decisions can be made based on the aggregation of accounts, and those real-time decisioning can be made. So there are very, very interesting use cases which is getting developed on the infra, on the foundation of how UPI and the entire DPI has been built in. So I think, and one of the other key where NPCI is trying to do is to go global, where it is getting into different kind of arrangement. It is bilateral connectivity with the different countries. They are doing the consulting for different part of the world for making their infra come up and built in a digital payment infrastructure for them, as well as they're also offering those capabilities to build it for some of the countries. So there are discussions happening with Mauritius, France, Sri Lanka. There has been bilateral with Singapore. In Caribbean, we have been seeing that NPCI is playing a role. So what is important is how we are trying to see the success of UPI now getting global, how we are trying to see, and each of the part of the world will have different kind of stories, but the idea is trying to understand the local challenges and create a solution, which probably where the core principle and foundation of design is going to be very keeping small, scalable, reusable assets, which can be used to really create the larger ecosystem with the integration. That has been the key. And I think those are going to be the future, and where what we are witnessing is a UPI kind of architecture being adopted in the different part of the world.
So that was a lot of great information on some ideas, some innovative ideas that you talked about, kind of like doing these tolls where the toll booths have their own unique identifier. And I think that's one of the things that was set the UPI up for success too, was that the merchants were all issued their own unique identifier. So what I'm hearing is they're taking this model of having all, not only, I guess it's almost like IoT, right? It's not only the people and the businesses that are having identifiers, but anything that needs to receive a payment is getting an identifier. So that's kind of interesting.
Yes, now almost 15 million transactions every month, and it is good number in India to give a unique identifier for each vehicle, and it has reduced the time for payments, which is used to be cash, from several minutes to few seconds, where
so the identifier is on the vehicle, not on the toll.
No, it is on the vehicle. Yeah, so you just scan it. You scan it, and it is connected to UPI, or it can be connected to any of the mandate which you have selected, and it will be auto paid. And in fact, you have to. And the way government is playing a role, if you do not have FASTag, which is the unified identifier for vehicle, you have to pay extra. You are penalized for not using that. So that is the way probably it is getting incentivized. The friction is getting removed. And India, with the kind of population density which it has, it is the need of the hour to reduce any kind of bottleneck in the traffic is a welcome change. So these are certain innovation which suggests that how a certain foundation or the architecture can be used and leveraged for thinking. It is like a blue sky thinking, where you can really see what problems the society is facing and look out for solutions around that.
I love it. I'm like looking on the comments here. Dawn is putting her comments, like she's like B2B, yes, transact. So I love the local understanding and working on integrating the teams, reducing emissions, reducing carbon emissions. So yeah, so it's great. So what we're hearing is like we can start. It's not only about financial inclusion, but where there's like a environmental element here too. I think that it's almost an interesting topic to talk about. Just what are those incentives? Because when we looked at the poll, so we didn't talk about the poll briefly, but we have customer adoption seems to be the biggest hurdle of deploying new rails, and then the next result down was the difficulty in integrating with other platforms. So I think those were things that you guys definitely addressed.
I think that is one very interesting point to be taken from India, is how the government, private entities and the public entities came together for this solution, and how government became the catalyst for really pushing for the UPI or the digital payments by demonetization, where the focus was to remove the black money in the circulation, where it was made sure that the payments and the digital payments was incentivized. So every player really came together, and that is that is important when we are talking about customer adoption. How do you build that trust, and how do you make sure that every player in the entire ecosystem have a very clear value which they are going to get out of this kind of innovation?
So when we're talking about value, I think this is a good place to pivot to monetization, because one of the things I hear a lot with instant payments is, well, I mean, you guys are offering in India, instant payments are free. So if instant payments are free and it's cannibalizing interchange rates, like, so where are banks making money? I think I don't know if Srishti, if you want to take a first pass at like where is money being made for these players, particularly for the banks? Because I see merchants are definitely benefiting, consumers are benefiting. Where are the banks benefiting? Oops, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Srishti.
So sorry, I didn't realize that I touched the mute button. I just had to get out of the sound, so I had to move my computer. It's the aspect of the interoperability and the ease of use, the adoption, the number of like transactions that are happening digitally versus cash. Like cash is costly. Cash is like handling cash, maintaining cash. Cash is really costly. And I think a lot of those, and then there wasn't really an opportunity for global players to be able to participate in the ecosystem in India. That's where the banks are really benefiting, to be able to offer new and more services to their customers to get stickiness, and to also be able to invite global interaction. One of the key elements, which I don't know if we're going to have time to touch upon today, which is fraud. So real-time transactions is a huge, huge gain, but if you're losing money on fraudulent transactions, so if you look at various other countries that have launched real-time payments, the number of fraudulent transactions really quadruply increases once you have real-time payments. So 3 years after UPI was launched, NPCI created another RFP for fraud and risk solution, because they realized this was going through the roof and was a real need. And I'm humbly saying that RS Software again bid, and we won this as well. And we not only launched the solution, we also operate it. So the areas that the banks are saving with fraud, what they're gaining with the AI ML aspects that are built into the fraud solution. So we're talking a lot about confirmation of payee, for example, in the UK, and how it launched and what success it's had. UPI, when it was launched, had confirmation of payee already built in. So I think it's these kinds of aspects that are built into the solution in terms of verification of payee. And here, one of the key differentiators of verification of payee and confirmation of payee is, in India, you don't have to list the name of the payee, which can be another huge area for making a transaction, a fraud, weaker. In India, because we have the biometric Aadhaar, the unique identifier for every single individual, we have confirmation of payee, where it's built in to be able to reduce the friction at the UX level as well. So I think that's where the banks are benefiting, to be able to have the interoperability, settlement in real time, like 2 seconds, like that's huge. There's a lot of, so we look at real-time payments that are not settled in that quick up speed. There's float money. So who benefits from the float? The money that's sitting before the transaction's actually gone through all the way in settlement. In real time, it can take place, but on the application the customer is looking at, but in the settlement aspect, the back end, who's gaining from the float money. So it's all of these where the banks have really benefited from. So the offering it as a low cost mechanism for adoption is really creating a huge increase in all of the different monetary elements. It's reducing friction, and it's reducing cost and fraud for the banks.
And improving automation efficiencies, it sounds like.
Exactly.
I'm going to launch 2 polls, guys. So one is on just getting your perspective on monetization priority. Like, what do you guys think? Where are the places that you think it's beneficial to charge fees, whether it's charging transaction fees, or Srishti was talking a lot about kind of like these value-added services, or reducing fraud, leveraging payment data for new insights, and driving new business models via embedded finance. I think Vijay was kind of alluding to a lot of this stuff with some of this forward-thinking tools with like lending and the car tolls. And then I'm also launching a poll on the fraud aspect because, we're always concerned about fraud. So with instant payments, what's your perspective on what's your biggest concern around fraud? Is it, real time? Is it important to have that real time fraud detection and prevention? Is it about the data security and transactions? Is it about the scalability? Like, how do you scale fraud prevention systems? Or is it about kind of monitoring? This one was one, just pick your top one. It's not, you can't do multiple choice on that. So if you want to take a look at that. And so I think that was really great. Why don't we talk a little bit, I don't know, Vijay, if you have any more comments around security or if we want to switch a little bit more to this global strategy. I think it's really interesting because like you both mentioned about this global lens where, since UPI has been around for 10 years, actually let's skip to the global perspective because it's been around for 10 years. And what we're seeing is like all these countries want instant payments and UPI is the poster child. And so NCPI has created NIPL, which is the framework that it's taking to other countries. But like you guys talked about things that were very specific to India, like the digital identity program and all that aren't necessarily transferable. And so I'd love to understand a little bit more about your views on what this means for other countries. I don't know, Vijay, do you want to go first?
I think the most important part of where India benefited, it was it never had adopted cards. So it was a cash country. And if you compare with US and Europe, where people have the US is a completely credit business. Europe has been typically a debit market, where it is also to do with the way the preference of payment had been. So where they have been able to establish the value has been the key, where the different players didn't come together wherever the government tried to really build that entire ecosystem and establish the trust. I was reading somebody's note where they were mentioning that lack of trust between the corporates and the government was visible. They were not on the same page. So I think that is where one of the key would be, how do we take the advantage of the entire real-time payment ecosystem in the cross-border payments? Because now world is becoming really global. There has to be much more transparency, and the whatever cost which cross-border payments are incurring, how do we connect the entire real-time payment world together is going to be the key. And India is definitely taking a leap there. But nevertheless, now the focus is how do we make sure that we, with ISO 20022 coming in, interoperability becomes extremely important, and GPI and other initiatives. How do we make sure that we bring more transparency for where bring the traceability, reduce the operational costs for the different players, and make sure that with e-commerce coming booming, the global e-commerce volume going up, how do we make sure that we take the advantage of the ecosystem that we have built in? Just the way foundation has been built in India, and there has been different innovation use cases, the value of payments has to be established in all these countries where the adoption has been slow. Fed clearinghouse hasn't really seen the kind of volume. And the kind of another challenge which the world, these countries like US and Europe had been facing is the banks having a lot of technology debt in terms of the legacy system. India had that advantage because there wasn't so much of legacy system. So the amount of changes which the banks needed to do wasn't huge. Here, how do you make sure that ISO 20022 really come into play? How do you make sure that the things are how do you define the value-added services, overlay services over the real-time payment system is going to be the key. Request to pay is a great way. How do you create those vertical solutions where telecom players see how to really take advantage, how to make the liquidity come into play in the insurance, in the healthcare? So payment become a really embedded capability. It is no longer seen as a separate entity which has to be done. It has to become completely frictionless and seamless in the operations.
Most
it's
definitely. One clarification, the banks in India, while they may not have, they did have legacy, of course, because they existed for a while, but they were not digitally savvy enough with APIs. And that's where once we launched UPI, we actually launched a connector product for all of the banks to be able to, so it can sit upon the existing platforms at the bank. And this is actually a platform that is been deployed for our software across North America and Europe. So the platform sits across sits across the existing platforms of the bank, and then is able to interact from 8583 to 20022, and then is able to call APIs from UPI. So that was something that the banks needed to be able to, in order to play in this ecosystem, they needed to be able to have these API, they access the open API network. So yes, most definitely that's been a huge benefit from that aspect.
Yeah, and I've heard, I mean, there's so many big themes that we heard today, so we talked about the benefits of ISO 20022, especially as we kind of go global. We talked about open banking. We talked about confirmation of payee and how all these security elements were already built in as part of the model of deployment. I know we're kind of wrapping up here, so I'm just thinking about the key things that we learned. I mean, there's so many things that we learned today, so I really appreciate all you guys, like the insights that you provided, Srishti and Vijay. But I guess some of the things I took away that are important is, when UPI was first launched, there was a lot of fraud, but it was so those fraud systems were quickly followed and built out. So some of the themes that's important is like designing it secure from the get-go, which we can learn from your system's learnings, and then also simplifying that journey. How do you make the user experience really refined and really simple, that it's easy for anyone to adopt despite their level of financial literacy? In the US, our systems are more back-end systems, are not front-end systems, so certainly opportunities for us to continue to explore and build on those front end. The confirmation of payee and that security element's really interesting. So I think it makes sense at some point to have a follow-on to talk a deep dive a little bit more on those incentive programs, on the the digital identity, how that all worked out, a little bit more on fraud, and I think there's just so many amazing things here to probe and explore. So
yeah, we can have an entire session on fraud.
Yeah, we're
absolutely, and one of the keys is the cost of wires and others, right? But that is the key. How do you eliminate? How do you reduce that to the point which the payers have to really get the benefit out of it? How do you remove? Why you should not be paying for making a payments? That is the key. Yeah. How to remove that.
What I would love is for the folks that attended, if there's follow-on items that you would like to see, maybe you could post them in the registration board, and we can see about scheduling a follow-on session. But I think this is really good. Again, thank you, Srishti and Vijay. And this will be made available as a recording on my Instant Payments Maven YouTube channel. So if you missed it this time, or if you want to share it with your friends, that's where you can look for it. And again, thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks, Marcia. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lord. It was a pleasure.